Well, often I get questions from people about different things that I play in the introductions to the videos that I post on YouTube. And I guess I should start by telling you a little bit about how I come up with those introductions. Usually it's just I'm sitting in my room playing guitar for fun, and I'll kind of start coming up with some ideas that I like, and then I'll just record them. And then I'll usually just take a sample of that and, maybe just a chorus or whatever, and I'll use that for the introduction. So the other day I was playing on rhythm changes, and I came up with a bridge that I thought was really good on one of the choruses, and I thought, well, I can use this for a lesson intro, and I could do a lesson on the bridge of rhythm changes because that's where everyone always goes crazy and plays all their altered dominant stuff, and I'm probably no exception in that regard. But I got to thinking, like, why don't I just try to transcribe the whole solo and then post it and analyze it a little bit? Because some people have asked me to do that, and I kind of realize why I don't do that, because it's really annoying and it's really frustrating when you can't transcribe your own lick, which is kind of what happens when you start trying to do it. So, but anyway, I did it in this case, and I can do it again if people find this interesting. So you guys just let me know, leave a comment, send me an email. But I was going to analyze a few portions of the solo. It's available in PDF form on my blog, so you can sort of read along while I talk about a couple things in it. Okay, so I want to start off by talking about the role that triads play in my world of improvisation. I want to be really honest in telling you that I was never a person who was able to take a chord scale and relate it to a chord. God bless you if you can. I'm just telling you that I can't, and I never could. And I think that my ability to improvise was hindered tremendously just by trying to approach music that way. So, like, I wasn't ever able to kind of go like, okay, 2-chord Dorian, 5-chord Mixolydian, and so on and so forth. It wasn't until I started to see the relationship between triads that I really feel like music opened up for me in the jazz idiom. So, for example, like I see a C minor 7th chord, and it's in a Dorian context. And I use the word context because I think that context is everything. So, meaning, like, it's not the one chord, it's not Aeolian, it's not the root chord. It's a minor 7th chord that's leading to a 5 or somewhere. So, like, when I see that kind of chord, like, I instantly see a whole bunch of interrelated triads. So, if I see C minor 7th, I instantly think to myself, A diminished triad, B flat major triad, things like that. And that's pretty much how I relate to it. So, I'm going to point out a couple uses of triads within this solo. So, looking at the second A section here right away, you can see that I play the C minor 7th chord. In the second bar, I play the B flat major triad in that line. And so what that gives me is the flat 7th, it gives me the 9th, and it gives me the 11th. And a lot of the bebop sound is really defined by those extensions of the chord, the 9th and the 11th on a minor 7th chord. Looking at the next bar, you have D minor going to G 7th, and it's the same kind of principle there. You can see that I play a B flat triad, and it leads really nicely by step from the F to the E flat, and it goes into what's basically implying a C minor triad there. But the B flat triad in that particular instance gives me the flat 7th there, and it gives me the sharp 9 and the 5th there. So that's what's happening there. The next part I'd like to talk about is the bridge. So kind of the same principles are going on here, actually. Look at the D7th for a second. You can see that I start out with the flat 13th, which is the B flat, and then I use some chromaticism to basically get into the F sharp augmented triad on it. And this is a triad I love to use over the D7th chord. And I think if you were going to look at it in terms of where it would be derived from in a chord scale, I think you'd say E flat melodic minor. Or there's a scale called Superlocrian or something. But it's basically melodic minor a half step above the root, and it's the third chord of the E flat melodic minor. Um, I don't again like I don't relate it that way as much, but I know some people do, so that's why I'm pointing it out. But if you look at the tensions within that particular triad, you get the flat 13th there, and you get the third, and you get the root within that particular triad. Moving into the second bar here, you have the F sharp diminished triad, which is giving me the third, the fifth, and the flat seventh. And then this is another thing that you're going to see a few times in this solo. I've actually worked on this pretty consciously a lot, and that's just taking like a basic, I guess, scale and starting it on, one of the tensions, or the upper extensions. All right, so here what I'm doing is I'm basically just starting the line on the flat nine, and then the rest of the notes in the four note pattern are just basically chord tones. You have the root, flat seventh, and fifth. But you're going to see this reoccur a couple times within the solo when we start getting to a line that comes a little later. Moving on to the next bar, the G7th. This is really interesting. I was kind of actually happy to see this. This was basically what's happening here is I'm descending from the third, and I actually play what's called a bebop scale off of the third degree here. And a bebop scale, I think a lot of you will know already, is basically a mixolydian mode with a passing tone between the flat seventh and the root. So it's basically G, F sharp, F. And then when you play it in eighth notes and you play it against the chord, you're always landing on a chord tone, and the passing tones or the upper extensions are always landing on the offbeats. So it's really interesting. And then quite deliberately there, I kind of land on that sharp 11th, which is the C sharp, and then go back down to the root. And so I thought that was a really interesting line right there. Okay, so moving on to the second half of the bridge, starting on C7th. Looking at the first bar, it's pretty straight ahead. I just play C natural, and then I go to the sharp 11th, land on that pretty hard. Then I hit the root again, flat 7th, back to the sharp 11th. So it's really the second bar of the C7th where things are kind of interesting here. I play E natural, and then I land on a really strong beat on the B natural, which is really contrary to the nature of the chord. And then I play A and B natural again. So I completely side slip out here. And this actually is derived from F sharp minor pentatonic, I would say. And I just don't play the F sharp, so I'm completely side slipping out of it. And I think it actually sounds really cool because, F sharp's a half step away from the next chord, which is F7th. And so it kind of gives it a little lift there for a second. And then the F7th, obviously, that lick there is pretty straight ahead and pretty inside. Okay, so now let's move on to the last A section. It starts out pretty straight ahead. It's got that classic Coltrane pentatonic lick in a descending fashion on the B flat major 7th. He's kind of known, I think, for playing it more as an ascending figure, but that's basically what that is. And then looking at the next part of the A section, you're going to see a fairly long line which contains some chromatic elements. And this is like the other really big thing in my playing personally that I've worked on a lot, which is using chromaticism to connect these different triads and different ideas. So we're going to see a lot of that. We're going to see a lot of the extensions get used here. So for example, let's look at the F7th there. Starts off on a ninth, which is the G, and then goes to passing tone to the third, then back down. And then you're going to see that thing I talked about before where I descend through sort of a scalular pattern. But in this case, it's on the G, and it's on the D minor 7th, so it's the 11th degree there. And then I go to the G7th and then descend using the flat 13 through the G7th there. And then it just goes into like a pretty straight ahead arpeggio on the C minor 7th there. All right, so finally wrapping it up here. I guess the only thing I'd point out about the end is just that I play a G minor pentatonic, kind of blues lick here that I resolved to B flat at the end. And that's something, Pat Metheny actually does that a lot. And I used to have an old guitar teacher who used to do that. And I think I might have picked it up from him. I think he knew one like kind of rock and roll lick that he used to play at the end of his jazz solos. So it's kind of become a little bit of a habit for me. But I hope you found the analysis somewhat interesting. And I guess the final point I'd like to make is like, obviously I think everyone knows like when you're playing music, like you don't really want to be like thinking about all this material, and no matter where you're at and you're playing, you've got a whole bunch of material under your fingers that you play based on intuition, but at one point it was just theory to you. So whatever you're working on, you just have to have faith in the fact that at some point it'll become second nature to just tap into that language. So I think it's real important to kind of remind yourself of that every once in a while. So anyway, let me know if you think this is a kind of an interesting format for a lesson, or maybe this will just be a one-time thing. And we'll see you next time. Thanks.